But in the main, the vast majority of studies, when people talk about the literature on father's absence, they are really talking about the literature of children being raised by heterosexual women, not without a partner in the home.
What conclusions, then, can one draw about the adjustment of children with lesbian parents from a body of literature that studies fatherless families?
Well, these studies of children being raised by lesbians, children who are growing up without having a father figure in the home, provide one way of determining whether children develop well-adjusted when they don't have a male parent figure.
Does the fatherless families research allow us to draw any conclusion about the adjustment of children raised by lesbian parents?
No, it does not.
Does the research on fatherless families tell us anything about the adjustment of children with gay parents?
Not directly, no.
Now, about the literature concerning divorced families. In your experience in the field, can we extrapolate any conclusions from the literature on divorce about the adjustment of children with gay and lesbian parents?
No, not directly.
Why not?
Well, because they're not. They're not exploring the influence of sexual orientation of the parent.
What about the research, the body of research concerning step families? Can the research about step families tell us anything about the adjustment of children with gay or lesbian parents?
No.
Who, Dr. Lamb, is Lauren Marks?
Lauren Marks was one of the experts that has been identified on the other side of this litigation.
And in connection with your work on this case, did you review Dr. Marks's report in this litigation?
Yes, I did.
And did you review the deposition I took of him?
Yes, I did.
At this time, with your Honor's permission, I would like to play a clip of Dr. Marks's deposition. The clip is 40 seconds in length.
Very well.
Your Honor, we would certainly object to it being in evidence. We don't object to it being played.
Very well.
Dr. Lamb, do you agree with Dr. Marks's view that gay and lesbian parents should be viewed as a, quote, discrete category when studying the adjustment of children?
Well, in order to understand the influence on children's adjustment, yes.
Now, in the course of Mr. Thompson's examination, or cross-examination of you, you mentioned a new study by Michael Rosenfeld based on the census data. That study has now been marked, or it was marked Plaintiffs Exhibit 2299. Can you tell us, Dr. Lamb, why is that study important?
Well, I think it's very important because it's the only study we have, and it's a very rare study, in fact, which compares all the children in the country with respect to the family environments in which they are reared. And that study shows, by looking at the couple of thousand children in the country being raised by lesbian couples, a couple of thousand children in the country being raised by gay couples, and compares them with children being raised by heterosexual couples with respect to one important index, which is the extent to which children are withheld or held back at school, and shows that when you use the appropriate controls, there were no differences in this index of adjustment between children who have been raised by gay, lesbian, or heterosexual parents.
And would, in your experience in the field of developmental psychology, is a sample based on the United States Census of adequate size to be reliable?
Yes, I think so.
And I want to return briefly to Mr. Thompson's. I guess his main point was that the Rosenfeld study compared heterosexual couples and not married heterosexual couples. Why would it make sense in your field of developmental psychology to maintain as a control group for unmarried gay and lesbian parents the control group of heterosexual couples raising children?
Well, that seems the most appropriate comparison in this case.
And why would it be the most appropriate comparison?
Because you have unmarried parents in all of those groups.
Okay. Now, in your field of developmental psychology, how is the term biological parent, biological father, or biological mother, how is that used in the literature of child adjustment, specifically the adjective biological?
Well, it's used in a number of ways. It's sometimes used in the to refer specifically to the biological genetic DNA sharing link between individuals. But in many studies, actually, the term is used more inclusively to include individuals being raised in intact families. And so children, for example, who have been adopted into a two-parent family would often be included with the biological, the children who are being considered to be in a biological family.
So it would include within the term biological parent a child that had, or a parent that had no genetic relationship to the child.
That's correct, yes.
And I would like to, at this point, publish a demonstrative of PX 1040. All right, I'll read from this. This is from Robert Johnson's study entitled The Relationship Between Family Structure and Adolescent Substance Abuse. Thus, the first relation, quote, mother, might be either a biological or an adoptive mother. Similarly, the third relation, quote, father, might be either a biological or an adoptive father. Now, is that consistent with your views of how the term biological is used in the field of developmental psychology?
That's frequently the way in which it's used in the survey literature, yes.
And I would like to publish another demonstrative from the same study. My screen is not working.
Neither are ours.
Oh, all right, there we go. Can you, Dr. Lamb, please read from the bottom, the footnote, the highlighted text from the footnote there?
It says, most studies do not distinguish biological parents from adoptive parents, since the latter is a rare family form in virtually all studies. Presumably, though, families in which both parents have adopted the child are considered to be intact.
Now, is that footnote, again, consistent with your view of how the term biological is used in the field of developmental psychology?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to offer into evidence Plaintiff's Exhibit PX 1040, which is the aforementioned study, and also the exhibit I mentioned before, Plaintiff's Exhibit 2299, which is the Rosenfeld study.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, they're admitted.
Thank you. Now, you were shown a great number of documents by Mr. Thompson, and one of them was a literature review by Brad Wilcox, which is located in Binder 2. Do you still have Binder 2?
Yes, just a minute.
It's at tab 26 of Binder 2.
Counsel, which tab?
Tab 26 of 113. And if you would turn to page 24, I'll read it for you. It starts at the bottom of page 24 and then carries over onto the top of page 25. It says, data from the National Household Survey on Drug Abuse show that even after controlling for age, race, gender, and family income, teens living with both biological parents are significantly less likely to use illicit drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. Now, how do you suspect Mr. Wilcox was using the term biological in this sentence?
I assume that he was using it to include adopted children, since the reference, I believe, is to the same SOMSA that you just gave us.
And would you be referring to the study of?
The Johnson report.
Right, the Johnson study that has just been admitted into evidence as PX 1040.
That's correct.
And it would normally be the case within your field of developmental psychology that when you cite to a source, you use the terms in the same manner in which the source does.
Unless you clarify that you're not doing so.
So now I would like to play a second clip from the deposition of Dr. Marks concerning the Wilcox study and the Johnson study. This is somewhat longer. Dr. Lamb, do you think Dr. Marks was correct, based on his reading of the research that he cited at his deposition, to withdraw his emphasis on the word biological?
Certainly, his use of this document, yes.
Do you think he was wrong to even offer that he should delete the word biological?
I don't have his statement in front of me, but yes, the word biological clearly is not supported in this context.
Your Honor, I would ask the court take judicial notice of the 2 deposition clips of Dr. Marks.
Very well. You will have to supply the specific page and line reference to the written transcript deposition as we discussed this morning.
Of course, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we would object to judicial notice being taken of, a snippet of the deposition without the report and context coming in. If they want to, first of all, if we don't think it's appropriate, but even if it were, we would say Dr. Marks's report should come in so the record is complete and it can be seen in its totality.
Let's take that up at a time. We begin to sort out some of these evidentiary issues, but what I'm interested in right now is the page and the line reference so we know precisely what testimony we're talking about.
Do you want that right now?
Of course not.
Okay. I'll be happy to provide you that at the appropriate time, Your Honor.
Fine.
Now, I would now quickly like to turn to Defendant Intervenor's Exhibit 108. This is the book Fatherless America. You don't have a copy of it, but it was one of the many documents you were asked to opine on. And you mentioned that you wrote a book review concerning Fatherless America. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And can you do you recall what you wrote about Mr. Blankenhorn's book?
Well, I was concerned that Mr. Blankenhorn had misrepresented much of the research, particularly the research on what I think you've called today gender-differentiated parenting.
Very well, Dr. Lamb. Thank you for your testimony. You may step down, sir. And can we call the next witness?
Your Honor, the next witness will be Helen Zia.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Your Honor, before we proceed with Ms. Zia's testimony, it appears that she's being offered to give testimony regarding her sexual orientation, her experiences with discrimination, the effects of being denied the right to marry, and the importance to her and her family of ultimately being able to marry. The relevance of this testimony is very unclear in that she's not a plaintiff in this case. She's not an expert in this case. And her particular experiences as one person certainly is not, as we've been talking about, a reliable sample of these issues. So her testimony, as described here, has no probative value to the facts at issue in this case. If the counsel would like to clarify, that would be fine. Also, on top of that, they have identified a host of documents that will be used in connection with Ms. Zia that are some of the same nature as we saw with Dr. Chauncey, some involving Dr. Tam, and otherwise appearing to be directed at the Chinese American community. None of that was disclosed. And we have been given no indication of what the relevance of that is in this case.
Your Honor,
Yeah. Who's going to address that?
I will address that, Your Honor.
And you are?
Danny Cho from the San Francisco City Attorney's Office.
Very well.
Her testimony is highly relevant. It is illustrative of much of the expert testimony that has come out. She also exemplifies some of the city's harm, showing the differences between how domestic partnership is treated versus marriage, and how marriage would generate far more revenue than domestic partnerships. With respect to the descriptions of her testimony, first of all, with respect to the documents on the messaging, these are all messages that she saw during the campaign for Proposition 8. These are all examples of incidents of discrimination that she experienced as a lesbian in California. And those are all clearly covered by the description of her testimony that we presented to the defendant interveners.
Your Honor, I would take issue with that description being consistent with what was just represented, but to the extent that this testimony is consistent with the expert testimony and to the prior testimony, it would certainly be needlessly cumulative. We've had 4 experts testify to the history of discrimination, the distinction between domestic partnership and civil marriage, including the 4 plaintiffs. For one person taking in what is reality off the street to testify in this case as to her particular experience with those things is not relevant because she can't speak as an expert. She hasn't been designated as such. Her opinion in regard to those things is also not probative in the fact of this case, and that's the standard for her testimony. has to make a fact that this case either more likely or less likely. Her experience with discrimination or same-sex marriage is not probative of any fact in this case.
Your Honor, if I could address that. In addition, the other important aspect of Ms. Zia's testimony is she has actually gotten married. And this whole case is about how marriage is going to change things for same-sex couples and enhance their relationships with their families. Here, she's a real-life example of that. And everything is sort of in theory. And what she is she demonstrates in fact that marriage does change things for people, and it's very important to same-sex couples, and it does indeed have a transformative effect. And there is nothing about that else in this case. And this bookends the plaintiffs who are telling you that they want to get married, and these are the reasons why. Well, she's an exact example of what they're looking for. And in that respect, she adds an incredible amount of probative value to this case.
Your Honor, not to belabor the point that that kind of evidence is the kind of evidence that is demonstrated through scientific and expert testimony. I mean, if the city would like to demonstrate that, then they should present a study with a reliable sample size of individuals that have experienced the things that Ms. Zia has experienced. So one single solitary individual to get up on the stand and to testify to her experiences can't possibly demonstrate what the experience of all the same-sex couples has been. It's not scientifically reliable. It's completely inappropriate in this context.
Submitted.
If I could just add one thing.
No, submit it.
Submitted. Sorry, Your Honor. A little too anxious, I apologize.
Experience counts.
Thank you, David.
One of the advantages of a bench trial is that evidence can be heard, its relevance and its weight can be considered and determined as the evidence is presented. And counsel for the defendant interveners has made arguments that the evidence that this witness is going to present is not relevant or of little weight. And that is certainly something that can be considered after the court has heard the evidence and evaluated it. It does appear from plaintiff counsel's representation that the witness is going to speak to issues that have been raised in the case and which are important for the ultimate resolution of the issues here. So, I will permit the witness to testify and make a final evaluation with respect to how much weight to give to that testimony and how to weigh it in the entire case, and we can go along. But it does appear that it is being offered on subjects that are pertinent to the overall issues in this litigation. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Zia. Let's begin by having you tell the court a little about yourself. How old are you, Ms. Zia?
I am 57 years old.
Where did you grow up?
In New Jersey.
How long have you lived in California?
Counsel, be sure to keep your voice up. And the witness?
Sure. How long have you lived in California?
For about 18 years.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 5 siblings.
Are any of them married?
4 of them are married.
Are your parents still alive?
My mother is still living.
And where does your mom live?
My mom lives in the Bay Area.
Where did you go to school?
Went to high school at John F. Kennedy High School in New Jersey, and I went to college at Princeton University.
Did you graduate?
Yes, I did.
And what degree did you earn?
A Bachelor of Arts degree.
And do you have any other degrees?
I have an honorary Doctor of Law degree.
From where?
From the City University of New York School of Law.
And what do you do?
I'm a writer.
Have you written any books?
I've written 2 books, and I've edited a number of publications.
Can you briefly tell us a little bit about the 2 books that you've written?
My first book is called Asian American Dreams, The Emergence of an American People, and it's a book about the contemporary history of Asian Americans, particularly around civil rights matters and struggles, trials, and tribulations over the last, I'd say, 40 years.
And your second book?
My second book was entitled My Country versus Me, and was the story of the Chinese-American scientist at Los Alamos National Labs, whose name is Wen-Hon Lee, who was falsely accused of being a spy for the People's Republic of China. And I co-authored that with him to tell his story.
Have you ever worked for any publications?
I've worked for a number of publications.
What was the last publication that you worked for?
The last one was Miss Magazine.
And what was your position?
When I left, I was executive editor.
Ms. Zia, are you a lesbian?
I am.
How long have you been a lesbian?
I think I've been a lesbian all my life.
And when did you come out?
Coming out is a process. And so there are a lot of ways to describe what coming out is. I think I first became aware that I was a lesbian when I was, or that I might be a lesbian, when I was in college, when I first learned the word lesbian. But there were a lot of experiences I had when I was younger, starting when I was even about 6 or 7 years old, that I look back now and realize that there were clear signs of what team I was on.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example of one of those experiences when you were very young?
Well, when I was about 6 or 7 or 8, I was just a school kid. You know, maybe I was in school, and there was a neighbor lady or a couple of adults around who typically ask kids, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so she asked me, so do you want to get married when you grow up? In the kind of tone that the expectation that the answer should be yes. And I was just a kid, but I immediately said, no, I don't want to get married. And I remember this because she was really surprised that, you know, here I was, a little girl, and I, you know, was so definite and emphatic that I didn't want to get married. And it was very clear to me, even at that time, that I really couldn't imagine getting married to a man. It was just not in my worldview or imagination.
And you mentioned that you were first aware that you might be a lesbian when you were in college. When did you actually come out?
Well, I guess the clearest way to say that is I had my first relationship with a woman in the mid-1980s when I was in my 30s.
And how much after that was when you were in college?
That would have been about 12 years, 10, 12 years after college.
Why did it take so long between college and your first relationship with a woman?
There were many, I guess I would say, social pressures to steer me away from the person I really was, for me not to be a lesbian.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I actually had an incident that I can think of as a lesbian trial, where after I had left college, I had for a time attended medical school, and I quit medical school and realized that I wanted to spend more of my time doing community organizing like our president. And so I was involved in my neighborhood in Boston, doing a lot of community work, community organizing work in this particular time around ending discrimination in the construction trades for federally funded projects, which at the time didn't hire women. They didn't hire people of color at all. They were very restrictive but very high-paying jobs. So I was involved with a lot of people in my neighborhood, community groups, especially in an Asian community organization and an African American community organization. We were working together to do this kind of anti-discrimination work. And one day I was called to a meeting, and I didn't know the purpose of the meeting except that there was a meeting. And when I got to the meeting, there was a group of people, all of my friends, all these people in the community groups that I looked at as my family, my community. We worked hard together with each other for these causes. And they were sitting in a semicircle, and they asked me to sit down in the middle of the circle. And at the time when I was doing this community work, I was also involved in a lot of women's organizing. There was a very active women's movement in Boston as well, and I was involved in that. And so they called me to the meeting knowing that I did this work in the women's movement, you know, and they said, so sit here. We want to ask you some questions. We've noticed that you seem to be working a lot with women, and you seem to be working with a lot of lesbians. And you know, in our communities of color, the Asian American community there, we don't have homosexuals in our community. And it would be really terrible to have somebody who was a homosexual, a lesbian, working with us. Because homosexuality is a symptom of white petty bourgeois decadence. And so we really wouldn't want to have you with us, working with us on these causes if you are a lesbian. And the leader of the African American group said very similar things, that homosexuality is not something they could accept in the African American community. And after they laid out these things, as I sat in front of my friends, my community, people I considered my extended family, they laid that out, and then they said, "So Helen, tell us, are you a lesbian?" And I was about 23 then, and I sat there looking at the people that I trusted in this world, asking me that. And I had friends who were indeed lesbians, and I didn't know how to first answer that question. It was, are you a lesbian? What would make me a lesbian? I knew that I had lesbian thoughts, whatever those are, that I had had attractions to women, but I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have a membership card that said that I was a lesbian. I didn't get a toaster oven or a congratulatory message saying, "Welcome to lesbianhood." And so, but there they were, all staring at me, the people I trusted. And, "Helen, are you a lesbian?" So I said, "No, I'm not." And that made them happy. And for me, that was the end for them. The meeting disbanded. The trial was over. And for me, it was that I had stepped into the closet and slammed the door shut.
Did you do anything else in response to the lesbian trial?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. Did you do anything else in response to the lesbian trial? You mentioned you stepped in the closet and slammed the door. Is there anything specific that you did?
Well, I got the message very clearly that the thought I might be a lesbian and that doing work with other women in women's movement and having friends who were lesbians was something that was unacceptable. And so having said that I was not a lesbian and stepping right into the closet, I stopped seeing my friends. I cut off my ties with my dear friends in the women's movement there in Boston. I stopped going to meetings. I'd been involved in a leadership capacity. I stopped completely. I really shut the door.
Did you also used to have diaries?
Yes.
Did you do anything to those diaries after the lesbian trial?
I am a writer today, but I think I started that a long time ago, even before I realized I would become a writer. And I was an avid journal keeper. I wrote diaries from the time I was quite young. And after my lesbian trial, I knew that I had explored the thought. I had written down thoughts that maybe I was a lesbian. I find so-and-so to be attractive. I have these feelings. And so shortly after this trial, I was going to move. I was going to move from Boston to Detroit, and I was going to pack up my little car with all my small number of worldly possessions. And then there came a question of, what do I do with these diaries? And I became so concerned that what if I was driving on the highway and I got into a car accident and I was killed? And there are my diaries that say, I think I might be a lesbian. I took my diaries, which at the time was probably more than 10 years worth of diaries, and I went out to a field nearby, a construction site where there was a barrel. I put them in and I lit them up and I burned my diaries.
Ms. Zia, have you ever experienced any discrimination relating to your work due to your sexual orientation?
Related to my work?
Yes.
Yes, on a few occasions.
Can you provide an example?
Well, there was a time when I was invited to give a speech. I do some lecturing, and I was invited to give a speech to Notre Dame University, and it was in the 1990s, early 1990s, when there was a lot of anti-gay campaigns going on. And the person who invited me was aware that I was a lesbian. So one day after I got the invitation that she had extended to me, she asked me, "By the way, are you going to say anything about sexual orientation or about being a lesbian?" And I hadn't really thought much about what I was going to say yet, but I said, "Well, I'm not sure, but now that you asked me, I might." And she said, well, in that case, I don't think you should come. And she rescinded the invitation. So that was one incident.
Have you ever experienced any discrimination from family members due to your sexual orientation?
Yes, I have. When I came out to, well, when I was delivering a lecture in the New York area, I have a cousin out there, and he was very interested in the books I had written. He was very interested in hearing my lecture. He came to my lecture. And in my lecture, I talked about being a lesbian, and I talked about the discrimination that's faced by people of color, by lesbians, and the fact that I was a lesbian. And it was a very small part of my lecture, but after that, he completely cut off all ties. I had even made attempts to contact him when I was going to be visiting New York, but he has never returned a single phone call or message since then.
Ms. Zia, do you ever feel physically threatened because of your sexual orientation?
I feel constantly aware that my sexual orientation could, for whatever reason, provoke violence toward me or toward my loved ones. And so I do feel that as I walk through life, as I go through streets of San Francisco or anywhere else, especially when I am with my wife, that I feel very aware of whether we express our affection towards each other publicly, have any public displays of affection, whether we hold hands in public, where that might be. And my spouse is very affectionate. There are often times if we go to the movies or go to have dinner, like any other committed married couple, there might be a time where you would want to put your arm around the other and just hold each other, hug each other. And Leah is very inclined to do that. And I feel there are a lot of times when I do actually push her away and say, look where we are, we have to be careful. And even within our own neighborhood, I feel alert. I feel bad about that, but I feel very conscious that there are people who hate us and just for who we are, and that we have to be careful about that.
Ms. Zia, do you remember the Proposition 8 campaign?
Yes, I do.
Did you encounter any discrimination during that campaign?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe some?
Well, I guess I would begin with the very notion of a campaign that would degrade and devalue the marriage that I have with my wife, the most important person in my life. And to see the ads and the misinformation and the deceptive kind of things that are said about us, I would say that I feel that that's highly discriminatory. To have read or experienced people saying to me, coming up to me and making slurs, calling me names, telling me that I'm an abomination, that my marriage to Leah and other people like us, people have said, when we were working on the Prop 8 campaign, we had worked on the campaign to try to get people to vote no on Proposition 8. And when we would be out on the streets of San Francisco, in Oakland, handing out flyers, people would just come up to us and say, you dyke, and excuse my language, Your Honor, but you fucking dyke, or you're going to die and burn in hell, you're an abomination. And to read the materials and to see the kind of things that have been put out there about us, like our marriage, our existence. My marriage to Leah is going to cause people to have sex with animals, to contribute to bestiality in society, or that my marriage to Leah is going to, I guess, cause them to marry other people so that there will be more polygamy in society, or that my marriage to Leah is going to cause great harm to their children and lead to the molestation of children, and that my marriage to Leah is going to cause the end of the human race. And while we were handing out flyers, dozens of people, separate in separate locations, separate times in different cities would look at the flyer, laugh, or just look at us or say something with the most derisive kind of expression and say, "No more people. With this, no more people, no more human race." That we, such abominations, would be the cause of the end of the human race. And to me, these were all highly discriminatory because, in essence, they're saying that we are so offensive, that we are so not worthy of being human beings, of having the full rights and equality that every other human being, heterosexual human being, can enjoy just to be married to each other, that we would be the cause of the end of the human race. And if we were to cause all of these things, then we would be, what do you do when somebody's going to end the human race and cause great harm to your children and cause all this terrible stuff? Well, you're going to want to stamp them out. And to me, that was a highly painful and discriminatory and hurtful message that I also felt endangered us as well.
Ms. Zia, if you could turn to the binder in front of you, and it's PX2119. Can you take a quick look at it?
Yes.
Your Honor, object. This was not one of the documents that was identified as an exhibit that was used in connection with Ms. Zia.
Your Honor, we disclosed this exhibit on Wednesday and we alerted them. It's now Friday. They have had it for 48 hours. I don't see any prejudice to this. They have had plenty of time to take a look at it and observe it.
All right. As long as it was disclosed prior to the witness's testimony and in accordance with the standing order that we've given in this case, this will be fine. You may present the exhibit to the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me what it is?
It is one of the pages from a website called One Man, One Woman.
When did you first see this page?
I saw this website and this page during a Yes on 8 campaign.
Objection, Your Honor. Document does not appear to be a document that was put out by protectmarriage.com, and as we've indicated earlier, those documents have been excluded already.
You can take that up on cross-examination, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Can you read the first sentence in red?
Homosexuality linked to pedophilia.
Then can you read the next sentence below that?
Studies show that homosexuality is linked to pedophilia, and then there is a ... and more, a link to more of that.
And you recently, just a few minutes ago, you described basically these types of messages that you found offensive and hurtful. Is this an example of one of those?
Yes, this is one of those.
Your Honor, I would like to move this into evidence.
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm sorry I missed the number of the document.
Is PX2199?
There's no indication that there's any foundation for this document. As I've indicated a moment ago, it's not an official campaign document from protectmarriage.com. It's highly prejudicial if it's associated with the campaign as an official document, and it should be excluded.
All right. You made your objection, your 403 objection. I'll reserve until you're cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Zia, you've mentioned that you're married. What's your wife's name?
Her name is Leah Shigemura.
And before you married, I'm going to call her Leah. Had you been married before?
No.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you feel about Leah?
I feel that Leah is my soulmate in life. I love her. She's the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. She's the most important person to me.
When did you first meet Leah?
I first met Leah in 1983 here in San Francisco. I was living in Detroit at the time, and we were both involved in a civil rights campaign that revolves around the hate crime against Chinese American man in Detroit named Vincent Chin. And I was in Detroit, part of that campaign, and we came to San Francisco as a part of the educational piece of that campaign. And Leah was on the organizing committee here in San Francisco.
When did you and Leah start dating?
We didn't start dating until many years after that, about 1992.
And when you started dating, where were the two of you living?
Leah was still here in San Francisco, and I was in New York at the time.
And did you eventually decide to get together in the same area?
Yes.
And I assume one of you moved.
Yes, I moved out here.
When you moved, did you give anything up when you moved to San Francisco from New York?
Well, I had been born and raised in New Jersey. I was an East Coast person, so I left the East Coast. But I was well entrenched, I guess I'd say, in my journalism career. I was at Miss Magazine. I was an executive editor, and I was in the succession to be the editor-in-chief of Miss Magazine at the time. And then I met Leah. And Miss Magazine, the job I had, was really the job I had always wanted. It was where I wanted to be. But when I met Leah, I knew that this was the woman I wanted to be with. This was the person I wanted to be with all my life. And so there was really no decision to make. I left New York, the East Coast, the home I had, but I left the job that I had always wanted.
Have you and Leah ever registered as domestic partners?
Yes.
When did you first register as a domestic partner?
We registered as domestic partners first in the city of San Francisco in 1993, shortly after I moved here with Leah.
Can you describe the process of registering for a domestic partner at that time?
Yes, it was actually a little anticlimactic. We were excited about being able to register as domestic partners. We came to City Hall. We went to a window that I would describe as it's kind of an all-purpose postal window kind of thing, where I think they issued dog licenses as well as domestic partner licenses.
And how did that process make you feel?
I left feeling a little like, so this is domestic partnership. We walked away with a little certificate, the kind that a kid gets for the perfect attendance of the week. And so it was just a little certificate like that, we still valued and we put in a frame, but it didn't feel like much at all. It wasn't the kind of thing we sent notice out to friends about or sent invitations to a party or anything.
You didn't have any celebration?
No, not at all.
Did you later register as a domestic partner with the state of California?
Yes, we did. When state domestic partnerships became available in, I guess, 2003, we filed for domestic partnership again with the state.
Can you describe that process, please?
Well, there was no dog license window at the time. Instead, we downloaded the form from the internet, filled it out, got it notarized, and mailed it in. And that was it.
And did you get something back in the mail?
We got another form back in the mail, and it said, "You are now domestic partners in the state of California."
And did you hold a celebration?
No, not at all. It was, getting that form in the mail was not an occasion to write home about.
So you mentioned that you were married. When did you first get married to Leah?
We got married in 2004 during the President's Day, Valentine's Day weekend, the first moment that we could, when marriages became available to same-sex couples.
Can you describe how you decided to get married?
Well, at first we weren't sure that what we were seeing in the news was real, and we talked to each other. We said, "What? Look at this. Is this real?" And we thought about, okay, should we get married? But we would want our family around us, with us, if we were going to get married. Your dad is in Honolulu. He's pretty elderly. My mother is also quite elderly. And I thought, well, all those people have to stand for 8 hours in the rain. I don't think we can subject our parents to this. And then I got a phone call from my mother who said, "Helen, I saw on the news couples can get married. You and Leah can get married now. Why don't you get married?" And that was Mom. So that was like, oh, okay. And then there was just the logistical question about everything was happening so quickly. How would we manage this? We had friends who were working in the city, the San Francisco City Assessor Recorder's Office, who were actually in charge of getting the marriage licenses done, getting the process done. And they were looking for volunteers. They were looking for people to help process these thousands of couples who were applying to get married. And they asked if we could volunteer. Leah and I both know how to type and file and do those kind of things. So we said, sure, we'll come in and help. So we came in on, I believe it was Monday, President's Day, and it was a, government holiday, but the office was kept open through the volunteers, and we were there and typed and filed for about 8 hours. And the line was all the way around the block. And at the end of the day, after we had typed all these people, and I was in the process before Leah, so I was typing people's applications as they were coming in, and she was later doing something else. And I was done. They had closed the line. It was almost, 5 o'clock or whatever time they were going to close. And so I looked at Leah and I said, should I type out an application for us? Would you marry me? And Leah said, I can't talk right now. I'm busy. I'm still filing these people's things.
Very responsible of her.
Yes, she took her responsibilities very seriously. And so while she was still processing other couples to get married, I was there with the word processor, and I filled out the form for us. I put her name and put in all the information, and put my name in all the information. And then I had the form, and I took it over to her, and I said, here's a marriage license. Would you marry me? And she said, okay. And so there we were, probably one of the last couples of the whole day, after everybody else had been processed. The people who had waited in line for 8 hours were done. And then we went ahead and had witnesses and had a justice of the peace marriage ceremony.
Did you celebrate at some point?
We did. It was then after we had our marriage licenses and we were married. Well, okay. Then we started talking about, like any other couple, how are we going to celebrate this? And we decided that we wanted to have a big wedding reception. A wedding reception like every other couple would have with a wedding banquet. We issued wedding invitations, had them printed up, with all the little envelopes and things like that. Drew up a list, had all the kind of discussions and even a few arguments about what kind of music are we going to play, where will we go, how much are we going to spend, what date. We picked a date in August for our wedding party, August 20th, and sent the invitations out to 150, 200 people, and did all the kind of things to prepare for a big wedding party.
How many people attended your wedding?
About 150.
And did your families attend?
Our families, our wonderful, loving, and supportive families came from all over the United States. Leah grew up in Hawaii, in Honolulu. I grew up in the East Coast. So we actually had friends and family coming from the entire span of America, from all the way from East Coast to Hawaii, flew in to come to our marriage, our wedding party, our wedding celebration. And we planned also to have an affirmation ceremony there. Leah's dad, who at the time was 86 years old, Leah's dad was a retired judge in the state of Hawaii. So he came, he brought his judge's robes, and he was going to officiate with an affirmation ceremony at our wedding banquet.
Can you turn to your exhibit binder, PX600? Do you recognize that picture?
Yes, I do.
What is the picture of?
It's a picture of one of our family groupings at our wedding reception, wedding banquet. And this is a picture of my mother, my siblings, and some of their children.
Your Honor, I would like to move this into evidence.
Very well, 600 is admitted.
Did your marriage later get invalidated?
My marriage?
The first one.
My marriage was not later. My marriage was invalidated about a week before our wedding reception.
And how did that make you feel?
Leah and I were devastated. We felt sad. We grieved. We felt pretty horrible that our marriage that made us so happy and brought us so much joy, made such happiness within our families, was suddenly rendered invalid. And we felt that it wasn't just a statement that our marriages were invalidated. We felt that our relationship was invalidated. We felt that we, as human beings, had suddenly become invalidated, and we felt pretty awful.
Did you and Leah later get married again?
We did.
And when was that?
In June of 2008, as soon as that opportunity became available.
Now, Mazia, how has getting married changed things for you?
Getting married has made changes in so many multitude of ways, tangible and intangible, in our lives, that we are even discovering new ways every day. But in the most immediate sense, it was in how our families related to us. And so when we first got married in 2004 and had our wedding party, we have a niece who was 2 years old when Leah and I got together. She's my brother's daughter. And she has only known Leah and me as Auntie Helen and Auntie Leah. She has only known us together. And she was about 15 or 16 when we had the wedding party. And in this exhibit, she's standing here. She came to celebrate with us. And when she got off the plane and she came and saw Leah and me, it was the first time she really saw us after our wedding vows at City Hall. She came over and gave us a big hug, gave Leah a hug, and said, "Auntie Leah, now you're really my auntie." And here we were. I was a little surprised at that because I thought, well, you've only known her as your auntie. She's always been your auntie. But then I could see from her little child and teenager point of view that somehow us being officially married made a difference to her, and that Leah was now really her auntie. It made a difference to our parents, to how our parents related to us. It made a difference to how we related to people. Because when you say you're a domestic partner, people, Leah and I spend a lot of time with each other. We go to social engagements with each other. We go to work engagements in the world. And people say, well, who's this person who seems to be hanging on to you awfully close? And if I say, oh, she's my partner, I can't count the number of times people say, oh, partner in what business? And Leah and I got used to having to have an answer to that, to say, well, we're partners in life. And then we just get used to watching the look on their faces to see whether they got it. And often it would just be this look of bewilderment. Oh, what business is life? Do you mean life insurance? And for our parents, and for our families, marriage is not just about us and our relationship. It's a matter of how our families also relate to people. For me to show up at every family event in Leah's family, every kind of social engagement in her family, people ask, who is she? Who is this? And for her parents, or for her 94-year-old auntie to say, well, this is Helen's friend. Well, she must be a really good friend because she's been coming to these events for the last 17 years. She's a really good friend. But friend didn't quite capture it. Partner, they never got. They never said, oh, Helen is Leah's partner. And suddenly they were able to say, Helen is my daughter-in-law. My mother is an immigrant from China. Her English is her second language. She really doesn't get what partner is. I would be around her and her friends who would look at Leah, and I could hear them say, sometimes in English, sometimes in Chinese, who's she? And my mother, before we would marry, would struggle and just say, she's Helen's friend. And then it changed. And she would say, this is my daughter-in-law. And they would get it. And whether they approved or disapproved, it didn't matter, they got it. It's like you don't insult somebody's wife. You don't insult somebody's mother. She's clearly saying, this is my wife. That's it. End of story. There's no questions. Wife in what? Spouses in what? We're not partners in life or in some business. And so it changed things on a very huge level like that. And beyond that, I would say marriage and how it affected our families was not just about us and how people related to us. Our families related to each other differently because marriage is, and I'm beginning to understand what I've always read, marriage is the joining of two families. So my family and Leah's family now relate to each other differently. My mother is the in-law to Leah's side of the family. Leah's father became an in-law to my brother, who lived about 5 minutes away from Leah's father while he was still alive. And in those 15 years before we were married, that my brother lived near my father-in-law, they didn't really make an effort to see each other. After we married, my father-in-law, Leah's father, actually would stop by my brother's house, stop by and drop things off. You know, fruit that was growing in his yard and things like that. My brother is quite active in Hawaii. Leah's, and so please bear with me as I describe the relationship. Leah's brother's wife, my sister-in-law, has a sister who runs the same circle as my brother. Okay, extended family. They see each other as in-laws now. When they are at a public event, they will go and my brother will say, "This is my in-law. You know, this is Candy. She's related to me." And people will say, "How?" And then he will explain, she's, you know, my sister and her sister-in-law are married to each other. And then they wait to look and see, you know, whether people understand that, but the message is that they're family. And so our families relate differently to each other. Leah's dad had a terminal illness. He was in hospice not long ago. He just passed away not even 2 months ago. When he was in the hospital, in hospice care, Leah and I went to the hospital and were at his side quite a lot. And of course, the other hospital workers, it's like, who comes to hospice care? It's the closest immediate family members. They're the ones who are there around the clock. And they would say to Leah's dad, who was not doing well, "Who are these? Are these your daughters?" And Leah's dad said from his hospital bed, "This is my daughter, and this is my favorite daughter-in-law." And so it was like, Leah said, he said daughter-in-law, and he said favorite. But it was a way that even in being so ill, he could describe who we were. And so that was a difference. That was a difference it made. And in the important events in life, which I guess if we summarize our lives and we say birth, our lifetime partner, creating our own family in death, when it was time for Leah's dad's funeral, that's when the family comes together. That's when you put out an obituary and you say who was in the family. When you lay out the memorial service hall and you say who sits here and who sits here and who has what role, and the members of the immediate family are there in the closest circle, and there was no question that I was Leah's wife, and that I was a member of the family, and there was no ambiguity about it. And I wasn't some partner in business or partner in life. I was her spouse. And I was right there with the first row in the family. And I had my responsibilities as well as being a member of the family. And so in those most important moments in our lives, marriage made it very clear that I was family, that we are family, and where we stand.
Thank you, Ms. Zia. I have nothing further.
Very well. Mr. Raum, you may cross-examine.
Good afternoon, Ms. Zia. I'd like to draw your attention back to the binder that you have there, a number PX2198. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Zia, do you remember when the first time you saw that document was?
It would have been sometime in 2008. I don't remember exactly when I saw it.
It was before the election.
Yes,
On the election on Prop 8.
before the election.
Do you recall where you saw it?
I was at home.
I'd like to draw your attention to the document where it begins, Californians have said twice. Do you see this?
Yes.
Can you read that entire part for me?
Californians have said twice to keep marriage between one man and one woman.
And based on that indication of the document, how did you see it before the election of Prop 8 in November of 2008?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Well, the document says, quote, Californians have said twice to keep marriage between one man and one woman. One time they voted in connection with Proposition 22. Do you recall that?
Actually, I don't.
Do you recall being involved in a case challenging the marriage laws in California?
I was, yes.
Okay, well, I'll represent to you that that was challenging Proposition 22, which was an initiative where the people of California voted to keep the definition of marriage as one man and one woman. The second time they did that was in connection with Proposition 8. Would you agree with me on that?
Well, I am fully aware of Proposition 8.
Well, would you agree that the people of California voted to define marriage as one man and one woman in November of 2008 when they passed Proposition 28? I'm sorry, when they passed Proposition 8.
I would say people voted for Proposition 8.
And this document indicates that the people of California said twice to keep marriage between one man and one woman.
Well, I'm not sure everybody knew what they were voting for. So I'm not sure that everybody who voted for Proposition 8 were voting for this.
But my question is to this document, the one that you're testifying to, indicates on its face that Californians have said twice to keep marriage between one man and one woman. That's the document. That's what the document says, correct?
That is what the document says.
And you're testifying that you saw this document prior to the people voting twice. Can you explain that?
Objection, Your Honor. This is a document we haven't moved into evidence and we haven't questioned her about. It's beyond the scope of direct examination.
I'm referring to PX 2198. I believe that you questioned her on this.
I introduced PX 2199.
I didn't ask about 2199. Nonetheless,
All right, you can pursue the subject.
I've asked her today on the stand whether or not she's seen this document before. And you testified just a moment ago that you saw this document prior to the election. Isn't that a fact?
I said that, but I realized that I saw this website before. It's possible that the website changed.
I see.
Are you moving in 2198?
No, I'm not, Your Honor. I would like to move on to PX 2199. Do you see that, Ms. Zia?
Yes.
Do you recall when you first saw that document?
I saw this website at the same time I saw the other one.
But this particular document that's been marked 2199, do you recall when you first saw that document?
When you say document, do you mean this actual piece of paper?
Well, this particular exhibit that's been marked as 2199 that you've testified to here today, that I'm referring to as a document, a piece of paper that's been marked today, when was the first time that you saw that?
I've seen this on a website prior to the election in 2008. I've seen this document as something printed out on a piece of paper this week.
And there's nothing in this document that indicates that it's in support of Proposition 8, is there?
This document is all about the point of Proposition 8.
My question is, Ms. Zia, there's nothing in the document that refers to Proposition 8. Isn't that correct?
There's nothing on this document that says Proposition 8 on it.
And there's nothing in this document that indicates that it was put out by protectmarriage.com. Isn't that true?
As far as I can tell, there's nothing that says that.
And there's nothing in this document that indicates how it was widely distributed. Isn't that a fact?
Well, this document was on the internet. This is a copy of something that was on the internet. So it was available to everybody in cyberspace.
But there's nothing that indicates how many people actually viewed it, though.
Not on this piece of paper, though if you went to the website, you could find, page views, I'm sure.
Thank you, Ms. Zia. And you know who actually wrote this document, do you?
No. I don't actually know.
Your Honor, based on all of that, I would renew our objection to admitting this particular document into evidence.
Well, the witness said she saw a posting from this website prior to the election. And I gather her testimony is that the content of this particular posting was one that you believe you saw prior to the November 2008 election. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Very well. 2199 will be admitted.
Ms. Zia, you've written materials that have been published that focused on issues addressing matters that are important to the homosexual community. Isn't that correct?
I've written on matters related to the gay and lesbian community, that's right.
And one of the things you've written about is, and advocated for, are harsher penalties for crimes motivated by sexual orientation.
Harsher penalties for crimes motivated by hatred of around sexual orientation, yes.
And you've also advocated for harsher punishments for crimes motivated by perceived gender and perceived sexual orientation as well. Isn't that right?
Yes.
You are currently a member of the Asian Pacific Islander Equality Organization, isn't that right?
Yes, I am.
And the purpose of that organization is to promote the visibility of Asian American, Asian Pacific Islander, lesbian, gay, bi, and transgendered people, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
And prior to November of 2008, prior to the election November of 2008, the organization held a press conference opposing Proposition 8. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
And the organization printed and distributed flyers also opposing Proposition 8, correct?
That's correct.
And the members of that organization, including you, attended rallies opposing Proposition 8.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you are also an advisor for the Horizons Foundation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that organization grants money to gay, lesbian, bi, and transgender nonprofit organizations.
That's correct.
And you've attended events put on by Equality California. Isn't that right?
At least one event.
You've also attended events put on by Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund.
Yes.
You've also donated money to Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund.
Yes.
You've attended events put on by the National Center for Lesbian Rights
Yes.
and donated money to the National Center for Lesbian Rights.
Yes.
You've attended events put on by the Human Rights Campaign. Is that correct?
I believe I've attended an event that featured the Human Rights Campaign once. I don't know if it was put on by the Human Rights Campaign.
You attended events put on by the ACLU as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've also donated money to the ACLU,
Yes.
which would make you a member of the ACLU.
Yes, but I'm not currently a member. I'm lax in my donations.
Are you affiliated with the Courage Campaign in any respect?
I don't believe so.
Back in 2004, you and your mother submitted sworn declarations on behalf of the city of San Francisco in support of their legal challenge to the California marriage laws that existed at that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the particular purpose of that litigation was to strike down California's state laws, which at that time limited marriage to a man and a woman. Is that right?
I believe so.
Now, did you write that Asian American queer activists do not all agree on what political stand to take towards same-sex marriage?
I believe I wrote something like that.
And in the same article, which is where the queer zone meets the Asian zone, you said, quote, "To some gay rights activists, fighting for same-sex marriage is too pretty bourgeois, too much about the nuclear family, cocooning property rights, and all the bad patriarchal things that marriage stands for," quote, end quote. You wrote that as well, did you not?
I believe so.
Now, you've testified today regarding some of the benefits that you've experienced as a result of being permitted to marry in California, correct?
That's right.
But you've also written that your civil marriage did not affect your critical view of marriage as a patriarchal institution. Do you recall that?
Yes, something to that effect.
And you also wrote that one of the reasons of why you married Miss Shigemura was to express your, quote, "defiance against the warmongering fundamentalist regime in Washington," end quote. Did you write that?
That sounds like something I wrote.
You've testified today that you first received a marriage license and certificate in February of 2004 when Mayor Newsom began to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Yes.
And you began to prepare for a marriage celebration and reception after that particular event. Is that true?
That's right.
And you indicated that this particular reception took place on August 20th, I believe.
Yes.
But in August, or earlier in August, that particular marriage license and certificate was invalidated by the California Supreme Court. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
But when you went forward with the celebration, nonetheless, correct?
Correct.
And the celebration was officiated by Ms. Shigemura's father, right?
That's right.
And her nieces and nephews also attended the ceremony?
Her nephew did. She only has one nephew.
I see. And your brother and your mother attended?
My 4 brothers and my mother attended, as well as my sister.
And 5 of your siblings gave a toast welcoming Leah into the family at that time, did they not?
Yes.
And you had a traditional Japanese, is it bonsai toast?
Yes, we did.
And you also had a Chinese wedding banquet where you had traditional foods that would traditionally be served at a wedding, correct?
Yes.
And you stated that this particular wedding party that you had, even though it wasn't officially recognized by the state, your wedding was not at that time brought about by the melding of you and Ms. Shigemura's extended family and friends, correct?
Yes.
In fact, in Where the Queer Zone Meets the Asian Zone, you stated, quote, "It was a wedding party that far exceeded our wildest imaginations. It seems to serve another purpose, too. The melding of our extended family and friends, our respective families, already so supportive of us, suddenly transformed their relationship to each other to reflect the more intimate relative status," end quote. So the fact is, even though that your particular marriage certificate that you received from Mayor Newsom was invalidated, the celebration still served the very purpose that you stated in this quote I just read. Is that correct?
Well, our families saw us as married, but there was a cloud over it. 1 week earlier, we had learned in the news, it was national news, that our marriage was no longer really a marriage anymore. And so we went ahead with our party, but everybody there knew that, it had been invalidated as well. And in fact, Leah's father, Judge Shigemura, said in his affirmation vows for us to repeat that he recognized that, but that he said courts sometimes make mistakes. And he said that as a retired judge. And so within the whole ceremony, there was definitely a recognition. The ceremony and the celebration, there was a recognition that there was a bittersweet element to it as well.
But none of that kept you from saying that it was a wedding party that far exceeded your wildest imagination.
Yes, right. That's right. And may I also say...
Well, if you would like,
okay.
your attorney can simply ask the questions to help you elaborate, if you like.
Okay.
I should say if he likes.
Okay.
And you stated, quote, that the wedding ceremony and banquet represented the union of you and Ms. Shigemura's family. Is that correct?
Yes, symbolically it did.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
Very well. Any redirect, Mr. Chow?
Very briefly. Just 2 questions. When Mr. Rahm interrupted you, you were going to continue saying something. Do you want to finish?
Yes. I'd like to say, in talking about the fact that our families came together even though our marriage had been invalidated, it was really the difference night and day between being domestic partners and being married. Even symbolically married, even though it had been overturned. It was as though we had tasted that we had been prisoners in a closet, that we had been deprived of something, that we had been told to sit in the back of the bus and accept this kind of lesser status of domestic partners. And suddenly, within those 4 months, February to 6 months, between the time we were married to that time that we had, our marriage was invalidated, that we had a taste that we were married. And during that 6 months, our families really did have a transformational moment that I think did transcend the sadness that we felt. But it didn't take away from the loss. We still recognized that we lost something very important. But in terms of their relating to each other, it was quite a different way from where we had a domestic partnership. The idea that we would be families, that we, for a brief moment in time, we experienced a feeling of what equality is. What, instead of having to go to the fountain that is just for a gay and lesbian couple, here we could go to the fountain that formerly said heterosexuals only. And we tasted the water that was sweeter there, and our families experienced that. And so yes, at the time of our wedding celebration, our marriages were legally invalidated, but we had already begun the process of our families coming together in a way that did not happen in the prior 11 years that we had been domestic partners.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Very well, Ms. Zia. Thank you for your testimony. You may step down. And I believe that should conclude our testimony today, counsel, and we are on the eve of a 3-day weekend, which I trust you will all enjoy. Are there any matters that we want to or need to take up before we adjourn, Mr. Boutros?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Your Honor. One thing, I may be ill-advised in the premises, but I think the court's ECF system may be going down for the weekend, and your deputy is indicating yes. We just didn't know if the court would like us to send, obviously, we'll serve any filings that may come up over the weekend or plaintiffs. But there's an email address for the court that we should
Can you
copy.
hand deliver? Let me ask the clerk how we're going to deal with that.
Email will also be down, so we need to get personal emails from them.
Well, I suggest you spend a restful weekend, Mr. Thompson.
Submitted. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further? Very well. 8:30 on Tuesday morning, counsel.
Thank you.
Thank you.